to go by native Old English words, yeah, there's a lot more French words than native Old English words still in the language. I'm going to skip around a little bit more from here on out so that we don't take a whole lot more time. Middle English, Old English, there were 4 dialects. Okay, you had Kentish and Wessex, Mercian and Northumbrian. In Middle English, that divides a little bit more, so that the Mercian becomes East Midlands and West Midlands. Northumbrian becomes Northern. Wessex becomes Southern, okay? Because it's not, the old Wessex, the boundary was like this. Right? So now it's started to creep up. Part of that is because King Alfred the Great, who was an Anglo-Saxon king, he expanded his kingdom up into this area, and so therefore the dialect that he spoke also became more important. I've got here 10 kind of major things of Middle English. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I do want to at least hit a couple of them that get a little bit about what we're talking about. The year 1250 is really important. Prior to the year 1250, the reason French was coming into English is because you had lower class English speakers trying to learn French, okay, so that they could get along in society. After 1250, what we see are French speakers learning English. And so as they're learning English, you guys who are French or Spanish majors know this, you go off to another country, a country of the language that you're attempting to learn. And what do you do when you start speaking with a native speaker? You're using mostly their words, but what happens when you can't come up with the word you want?
You try saying your native word, but at their accent.
Okay. So you use your word.
It works a lot of the time. Okay.
And that's what the French speakers began doing after about the year 1250. They're learning English, but they're borrowing their own words into the English language. Okay. What this shows is that by the year 1250, English won the battle. The battle between whether Anglo-Norman French would be dominant or English. English won the battle because now you have the upper crust of society learning the language of the people. Okay? A couple of other things. I can't read from where I'm standing. You got all kinds of areas of borrowing, which I'll put up another slide in a moment, just to give you a few examples. Okay? Borrowing from French, from government, religious, cultural, military, law registers of vocabulary. Okay? What else happens? The Old English ability for creating words starts to die. Okay? Why? Because you no longer need to practice that when you can borrow these words from these other languages, from French predominantly. Okay? Spelling changes happen as a result. Old English. C-N-I-H-T. Knicht. Knicht. French doesn't have a. What the French heard was Monty Python, Knigget. Okay? So we initially get this, and then we ultimately get that.
So it went from being C-N-I-H-T
to C-N-I-G-H-T to K-N-I-G-H-T. And what happens to this? Modern English.
The G part
it drops out. This sound, okay, here starts to drop out. Late Middle English, early Modern English, to where it's no longer pronounced at all. Okay.
Oh, so that was still in there in Middle English. Wow.
Yeah. Quite a bit. Right. I don't think I brought the chart. There's other consonant changes, but let's go on to this. Leveling of inflections. This is important, really important for us today, because this helps explain some of our modern English spelling problems. Children today are taught in elementary schools that a word like this,
Make.
what does this vowel do?
Lengthen the A.
It lengthens the A. That is a lie. That is a lie straight from the pit of hell.
You mean
this
Kel?
does nothing to this.
Sorry.
This is what's called a linguistic fossil.
Wait, so the final E on a vowel consonant E.
The final E on most words
Yeah.
is a fossil. What's a fossil?
Something from
It's a leftover.
It's a leftover. It's frozen. It's frozen in time. Okay? What's it a fossil of?
Ah,
See, there was always something that came after that E at the end of the word.
so it used to be maken?
The inflection, yeah. The infinitive form, tomaken,
Oh.
Ooh.
Huh.
okay? Which we say today, to make. Okay?
Huh.
So you have those kinds of things. So what happens? The example I usually use in my old English class, or in my history of the English language, is this one. The old English word, huzum, house.
Okay.
Okay? Huzum. This isn't this is nominative form, if I remember correctly. Okay? After a period of time, notice this changes first.
Oh.
Huzum.
So the final vowel.
The final
in
vowel changes.
In the non-emphasized
Right,
syllable.
right.
Okay.
It's what's called
Makes sense.
levels out. It becomes the default sound in the English speaker's mouth. What happens? You're giving a presentation and you can't think of what to say. It becomes schwa. Okay? So if you were to represent that phonetically, it's that sound.
Right.
Huzum. Okay? Then what happens? This becomes this. Becomes
So M to N.
Okay. To N. Yeah, M to N. Then this just drops off.
The N just
Why
goes
does it
away.
drop off? Because this is an unstressed final syllable,
And we throw stuff away on
and we
those.
throw stuff away. Why
Indeed.
pronounce it if it's unstressed and really not even necessary anymore?
Mhm.
Okay? And then, the thing we're going to talk about occurs for this, the great vowel shift. Vowels shift, okay, from one part to another part. Okay?
I was really hoping you'd go over that because I've heard of this great vowel shift.
I'll go over it real briefly.
Yeah, because
Okay.
they're like, well, basically all the vowels got screwed up. I'm like, but why?
Something happens as a result of this. Because of this happening, we lose what's called grammatical gender. Grammatical gender means you can tell what gender, what kind of word a thing is, how? Because of its inflections.
On the ends.
Whether something is masculine, feminine, or neuter. Masculine, feminine, neuter doesn't mean that the thing actual has that gender. That's why it's grammatical gender. It's not natural gender. You know, German. This is. I can't remember. If it were a desk, der Tisch.
Okay.
Okay, der masculine. But there's nothing masculine about this.
Right.
A boat is feminine. Okay.
Right.
Die Boot. Okay? There's nothing feminine about a boat in terms of its natural existence. Those are just grammatical terms we need for the categorization. So you start to lose all these inflections, and what happens? You no longer have gender. What else do you no longer have? You can't tell the case of something. You can't tell whether it's nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, or instrumental. This is why in Old English, you could say, the boy bites the dog, or the dog bites the boy, and it means the same thing. Because boy and dog would each have an ending. Word order wasn't as important. Modern English, boy bites the dog is entirely different from the dog bites the boy.
Indeed.
Syntax is everything. in modern English. Okay? You start to lose these inflections, and you get the rise of what's called analytical syntax. Okay? Something else comes along with that. This happens in the Middle English period. We start to pay attention to things like definite articles and demonstratives. Those become important.
Because we
The
don't
dog,
have.
this cat, that house. Okay? Anglo-Saxon or Old English has very few of those kinds of articles. Okay? What else? Pronoun simplification. They do simplify a little bit, but they're still pretty complex. Okay? Many Old English strong verbs die out during the Middle English period. Okay? They die out, meaning they're no longer used. They get replaced with French ones. And also, they're changing. They're becoming weak verbs. Okay? You have new dialect areas, which I just had up a moment ago. Let me go back. So here you have the Lord's Prayer. We already did it in Old English. I'm not as good in Middle English, but I'll do it. And here's the early modern English Book of Common Prayer from 1559. So, Vader ure, thuthe ert on heavenum. Ure Vader, that art in heaveness. The vowels are almost the same.
Yeah.
They don't change much in the Middle English period. But notice what does change in here. Spelling. Okay. Ure Vader, that art in heaveness. Syntax.
Yeah.
Hallowed, the hallowed, hallowed, the g here becomes w. Okay. Bethinama, the kingdom komato, bedi willadon in the als in heaven, give to us this day our bread, over other substance, and forgive to us our debts, as we forgiven to our debtors, and lead us not into temptation. It's entirely Latin. Okay? But deliver us from evil. Amen. And this isn't just our Father, which art in heaven. This is more like our Father, which art in heaven. Hallowed be thy. It's not thy, it's thy. Nama. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And I've got a Shakespeare sonnet that'll do real briefly in a moment. Okay? Examples of French words borrowed in English. Let me just look at all these.
That's a lot.
It's because of the French that we have justice and crime and suit and verdict and sentence and indictment and tourney. Okay?
Worth it.
I mean,
Cape.
think of the
Color.
English language today without this kind of terminology.
Poultry. Yeah. Sugar.
And notice cultural borrowings. Apparel, dress, robe, gown, garment. Dress, robe, gown. Really? How different are they? If you're an Anglo-Saxon, pretty much you've got one thing covering you.
Right.
What does French do? It introduces variety.
Right.
It's from French that we go from Old English red, okay, to vermilion and scarlet and burnt umber,
Crimson.
crimson, yeah, and all
Yeah.
these other colors.
Gotcha.
You know, dinner, supper, feast, mess. Okay? It's from the introduction of French that we go from, for example.
I think there's an eraser thing to your
I don't
left.
see one. Oh,
Yeah,
there it
in
is.
there. Sorry.
That we go from, for example, what's the French one?
Mouton.
Yeah, but it's the same word. It's not the one I'm thinking
Oh,
of.
okay.
Meat to beef. Beef.
Okay.
You get pig, pork.
Oh.
Cook to,
Chef?
no, cook as in what you're doing.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
What kind of cooking do you get? You get roasting, you get broiling,
Oh.
all these different terminologies. Where Anglo-Saxon generally had one word
Huh.
right, for these kinds of things. French brings in a rich variety of terminology. Okay?
Well,
So-
and French also brought in stuff from a bunch of other languages too, because French had already absorbed. It's like sugar. I think it doesn't. I think it actually comes from Arabic.
Yeah, I don't think that
Yeah.
comes in till 15th century. I'm not positive,
Yeah.
but I think that comes in the 15th century.
Yeah.
Okay? So let's jump up a little bit. Go to the early modern English period. So this is Shakespeare's day and a little bit earlier. Consonants continue to change. For example, the GH that I mentioned drops off, becomes silent in some contexts. Okay? Final ing drops off to just n. In Middle English, it was pronounced ing. In Shakespeare's day, it is pronounced in.
Really?
And then it comes back in the 17th and 18th centuries as a result of what are called the grammarians.
Oh my
Because
God,
the
I didn't know
grammarians
that.
say, well, there's a letter there. It ought to be pronounced. Okay? Great vowel shift.
Yeah, what the heck was that?
Do I have the? Yes,
I keep
do.
hearing about it in these different linguistics classes, and I'm like, what?
Great vowel shift indicates a shift, a movement of long vowels from the Old English and Middle English long vowels to modern English long vowels. So what do I mean? Create this vowel triangle. What this triangle is showing is where you're forming these vowels in your mouth. Okay? So this is high in front. So your tongue is at the front of your mouth and it's up high. This is high and back. This is low and center. Okay? So over here you have E. E. Down here you have ah. Over here you have ooh. And if you're going to add the diphthongs, you'd have ow and I. Okay? E, and then you have I, and then,
A,
yeah, A,
eh,
and
ah.
Okay, a. So E, I, a, pet, cake, pit, meat, cat, father. And then on this side, you got another one here, like the sound in park. And then you have,
Aw, right there. Yeah.
as in ought,
Oh,
O as in boat, as in put, oo as in moon. Okay? So, it's helpful for the great vowel shift to remember this. My feet ache, so do ours. It's a mnemonic device. What does it mean? Middle English, this would be using these symbols. Okay? Sorry.
Oh, I can already see it. Okay.
Me fate ox sa do urs. Me fate ox sa do urs. Okay?
And they just all went, vroom,
Yep. What
and
happens?
they're rotated basically.
My feet ache. This jumps up to here.
So E becomes I.
Mhm.
Wow.
Okay? Fate, feet.
So A
Okay?
becomes E.
This jumps up to here.
Uh-huh.
Ock. This jumps up to here. It doesn't do it in one big jump. This one actually goes like this. But it eventually makes it all the way up here.
That's a
We
big
see examples
change.
where
Yeah.
this has become, for example, this. Okay?
okay.
Sa to so. This becomes this. Okay? Do to do. This becomes this,
Wow.
and this becomes that.
Oh, so they kind of went,
Takes
everything
about-
shifted up.
Yeah, everything shifted up.
Oh, see, okay.
And it takes about 200 years.
Okay.
It begins around 1400. Actually, takes longer than 200 years. It begins around sometime around 1400, 1450. Doesn't finish until at least 1700. And the reason we know this is we can read all this poetry that shows us rhyme.
Yeah.
And it shows us modern English, these things don't rhyme.
Right.
Okay? But they should.
And also, I mean, spelling wasn't really. It was not standardized.
Spelling is not standardized
time.
at all. I mean, that's one of the things
Yeah.
we'll get to in just a moment. Spelling
Yeah.
isn't standardized at all. Okay?
Right.
Until the rise of dictionaries.
Right.
Yes.
Any theories about the external influences that might have sparked this shift?
Yeah, like why?
We have no idea why it happens.
Really?
None.
Huh. Well, that was a simple answer for it.
Yeah. It's,
We
so,
don't know. Well, okay.
Shakespeare's Sonnet 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, thou art more lovely and more temperate, blah, 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 blah. Here's a phonetic transcription. Okay, the first part's fairly easy. Shall, it's pretty close, but it's not it's shall. Shall. Shall I compare? Notice what's not being pronounced.
There's no R.
There's no R. Shall I compare the colon at the end means it's long. The schwa schwa to not to not a. Shall I compare the to a sms? Again, the R is not being pronounced. Okay. Die, not day. Thou art. What's that sound like? Yeah, it sounds kind of like ought, O-U-G-H-T.
Yeah.
Is there any American dialect that sounds kind of like that?
Southern. Like.
Just the opposite, actually. Pak, the ka,
Oh, right.
and Harvard, yad.
Right.
It's Boston English.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Well, but I mean, Southern English has that they drop the R's too, but
Yeah,
it's in
we
a
do.
different
We
kind
do.
of yeah.
It's called the loss of postvocalic R.
Yeah.
Okay? But it's not lost all the time. Look at the end of the second line. Temperate. Why is it not lost there?
It's intervocalic.
Yeah, well, it's not only because it's intervocalic, it's because it's beginning a syllable.
Right. Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
Roof, not rough. Roof. Winds do shake the darling buds of May. So if you get online, do a search for, if you're interested in this, do a search for
Yes, I am.
David Crystal, original Shakespeare.
Okay.
Look for his videos, David Crystal and his son, Ben Crystal, of original Shakespeare. Because they actually taught the Globe actors. Because a couple of years ago, the Globe did Shakespeare in Shakespearean pronunciation. The entire, I don't remember which play, but the entire play. And it's difficult. Okay?
Yeah.
He's the one that edited one of the newer versions of the Oxford English Encyclopedia, I believe.
Really?
Yeah, that is
He's
David Crystal.
He's amazingly
amazing.
prolific. Yeah, I have his book, The Stories of English, and it's
Yeah.
fascinating. But I'm only up through into like the beginning of the Old English stage, and I keep going, what?
His
What?
encyclopedia, I guess it's, I can't remember. Encyclopedia of the English Language, which is one volume about this big, about that thick. I actually used it for a history of the English
Yeah.
class 1 year. It's very,
Yeah.
very interesting.
Are we going to get to how rhoticism came back into some dialects?
Oh yeah, that's a good question.
Probably not. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so that was a little bit of the pronunciation. Let's see. Pronouns can be really interesting. Well, let me back up. How many have problems with apostrophe S?
Problems in that other people don't use it correctly, and I wish they would, because I have a problem that way. There's still that stickler in me.
What's the difference between ITS and IT apostrophe S?
One is a contraction, the other
One's a
one is
contraction, one's possessive.
possessive.
Okay. Why don't we use an apostrophe here?
Oh, for the it's possessive?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because we've already got one that has an apostrophe that means.
Because we have it for the contraction.
Right.
Okay. Look at under 2.1. Confusion of genitive final S with possessive pronoun is in ellipsis. Okay. Genitive final S, possessive S, apostrophe S.
Okay.
Okay. That's what we mean. Genitive final S means in Old English and Middle English, when words were possessive, they just ended with S or ES or AS.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So, what happened in the 16th century, and I give the example there, we actually see this in Shakespeare, is you see a phrase like Mars, his sword. But in pronunciation, it's not Mars, his sword. It's Mars, his sword. The H gets elided off. So in print, that initially gets written like this, showing you're cutting out the space between these two words.
So they put an apostrophe over the H?
Yeah.
Is that?
would appear-
Oh, I get it.
It
Oh.
would appear right there. It would appear just before the H.
Oh.
Okay? Then what happens is printers start doing this. Not only printing it right before, but taking out this space between.
So it becomes like
One
like
word.
it's one word.
Mars's.
Mars's. Oh. Wow.
That's completely new.
And it became
The apostrophe
they just took out
S.
the H and the I.
Yeah, the apostrophe S is entirely wrong.
Oh.
It is an historical mistake
Oh.
that came from printing. Okay?
Because the printers messed up?
Yeah, well, because of this. Because the
Right, I mean,
printers are
like-
trying to represent what's
Right.
what it's trying to do. It represents sound.
Right.
Okay? They're trying to represent how it's actually pronounced.
So in a way, because they made it a little bit more phonetic looking, it ended up changing the grammar.
Yeah. It
That's
became the
amazing.
bane of freshman writers, for hundreds of years. Okay? What else?
Wow.
Difference of pronouns. In Shakespeare's day, you've got two forms of personal address. You, ye, thou, thee.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? So what do those mean? Well, the you forms, okay, are formal and distant. The thou forms are informal and familiar. So, our Father who art in heaven, thou, thy king, that's indicating familiarity and closeness. The Y forms were predominantly used among people of upper class with each other.
Mm.
Okay. The TH forms are people lower class with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Y forms by people of lower class speaking to people above them in status or age or rank. Okay. The TH forms used by people of upper class speaking down to people of lower class. And Shakespeare uses this wonderfully in some of his plays. Scene in Hamlet where Hamlet's interrogating his mother. They go back and forth between the Y and the TH forms, indicating at times separation and distance, anger, and at other times coming together in closeness. I mean, it's really interesting if you pay attention to it.
That's very
Right.
powerful.
Yeah.
I kind of wish we still had those distinctions.
Development of ain't in the 17th century. Ain't is a perfectly appropriate contraction for I am not. It's when people use it improperly that it's wrong. Okay? What else? This we'll come up to again in a moment. The shall-will distinction. Okay, using shall in first person, will in second person. All right.
Yeah, I never understood. I mean, I tried to learn that.
I shall go to the store tomorrow. You will go to the store tomorrow.
And that's it?
That's it.
Oh.
That's the distinction.
What
But
about
it becomes important because a grammarian in the 1700s makes it into a rule and therefore says this is how it must always be used. Let's
Oh, I see.
go
Okay.
up to where these guys are. Three problems early modernism. We'll get to this real quickly. Varied pronunciation, unsettled orthography or spelling, and lack of vocabulary. Varied pronunciation. You got people pronouncing words all different ways. When I used to work on the Dun Variorum, I was reading manuscripts and stuff, and I get, a 16th century or 17th century manuscript, and you get dialectal varieties of words. I saw the word flower spelled a dozen different times, a dozen different ways. Okay, unsettled orthography. There's no standard. But what began in the late 1500s, in the late 15th century in England? What was brought to England from the continent? Printing press. And with the rise of the printing press, we start to see the orthography settle out. Why? Because books are now readily available. So who starts the settling out of the orthography?
Whoever's
the printers
doing the
are.
printing. Yeah.
Okay. Most of those printers come from this kind of the East Midlands area, just to the north and east of London. It's their variety that becomes the standard. Okay.
But
Lack of vocabulary.
But if for some reason it had ended up in like Northumbria,
Then we'd sound like Yorkshire
nice.
English today. Okay. Lack of vocabulary. There is this thought that English didn't have enough words. It didn't have enough variety of words to express what needed to be expressed. So, what happens? Vocabulary gets enriched by three different kinds of lexical borrowing. These are intentional. Okay? First kind, you have inkhorn terms. All three of these terms, by the way, inkhorn terms, overseas terms, and Chaucerisms, were meant derogatory, or meant as being derogatory. Inkhorn terms. It's the terms that kind of smell of scholars. The inkhorns, the people, studying with their books and copying words into the language. Just look at some of these. Ability, agile, exist. Shakespeare was the first one to use exist, by the way. Epitome, tonic, thermometer, phenomena, crisis, chaos. Where do they come from? They come from Latin and Greek, primarily. Okay? Overseas terms. These are terms that are borrowed from foreign languages as a result of trade and commerce. From French, alloy, ambuscade, bazaar, bombast, chocolate, comrade, detail, etc. From Italian, algebra, argosy, cupola, design, granite. From Italian through French, charlatan, frigate, parakeet, grotesque. Spanish and Portuguese, banana, armada, apricot, bravado, alligator. Okay. Chaucerisms. These are revivals of old native English words.
Huh.
These are just small listings. The numbers are huge for each of these. Bevy, belt, craggy, dapper, forthright, glen, glee, glance. Okay. Those GL words, native English.
Nice. Okay.
Birthright, changeling. Notice, by the way, of a lot of these, they're combinations. Merriment, birthright, changeling, okay? Forthright, gloomy, merriment, etc.
So the IGHT, is that any word that has that, is that pretty much
native.
going to be native Anglo-Saxon?
And
okay.
it's
Because it's from the ich.
Its old English form would be ich. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay? So we move from the Renaissance to the Restoration. The Renaissance pretty much ends, and the restoration of the Stuart monarchy occurs in 1660. What's being restored? Well, Charles I had his head lopped off in 1649. And you get an 11-year period called the Interregnum. No king, Oliver Cromwell. Okay? Charles II comes back in 1660. One of the things we see in the Restoration and throughout the 18th century is we see a reaction against what was going on during the Shakespearean period or during the Renaissance. Okay? Because the Renaissance had no rules. It was, let's borrow as much as we can. Let's be free. Shakespeare used double and triple negatives. Chaucer used triple negatives. It's during the Restoration in the 18th century that we get the rule. You can't use a double negative.
Right.
Okay? So, what do we see? It's reactionary. They try to found an English academy. Why? To stop the change of the language, to freeze it. So you get three main goals. One, reduce the language to rules, and ascertain a standard of correct usage.
Sounds very scientific, mathematician-ish kind of.
William Safire used to have a column in the New York Times on language. Safire was very much, in this sense, kind of a prescriptivist. You shouldn't use words in certain ways. H.W. Fowler's on modern English usage. You know that book? Okay. It's one of the style guides.
Oh.
Strunk and White,
That I know, yeah.
would follow in this. Right? 2, refine the seeming defects in the language. That means get rid of them. 3, permanently fix the language. Okay? This was one of the reasons behind the rise of the dictionaries. Let's fix the language. Let's cull out the words that shouldn't be used and get rid of them. Okay? Samuel Johnson had this firmly as part of his mindset when he set about writing the Dictionary of the English Language. Took him 9 years, I think it was 9 years. He produces it in 1755. Once Johnson's dictionary comes out, that's the first real, true dictionary. It becomes the model for every dictionary after it. Why? He quotes words within context. He labels parts of speech. He attempts to give etymology for some. Okay? So I
And
list here
usage
some of the
notes, right?
grammarians who are important. John Wallace. Notice, Grammatica Linguae Anglicanae. The grammar of the English language. Written in,
Latin.
and it's written in Latin. The whole thing.
Wow.
He posits the shall-will rule. Bishop Robert Loth, A Short Introduction to English Grammar, one of the most important grammars ever written, goes through 22 editions in the 18th century. Okay?
God.
It's Loth who says, don't end a sentence with a preposition. Don't begin a sentence with a conjunction. Never use a double negative. Okay?
Okay.
He applies Latin and logic. I think it was Loth also who said, you can't split the infinitive.
Right.
Why can't you?
Because in Latin,
Because
infinitives are one
Because
word.
in Latin it's impossible. It's one word. Okay?
So therefore,
But in English you can say to boldly go, which
Yes.
is what?
yes, you can.
It's iambic pentameter. It's
Oh.
native English rhythm. See? And even prose can be poetic. Right? And then William Ward, whose rules, notice he comes after Loth. He borrows a lot from Loth. A lot of his rules are the rules you will see in English grammar books today and such. Right? Real quickly, because I want to finish at 8. American English starts coming over with the first settling of America with Jamestown, 1607. So, what are things that the English settlers have to confront? New kinds of animals, new kinds of topography. Okay, so they have these new things. They got to come up with words for them. What do? They borrow Native American. I can't remember, and I didn't write it down on a note today. But the word for the Native American word for raccoon is something like that. It's just really long word. It's like 4 syllables. Okay? So we take raccoon and simplify it.
Right.
Okay? What else? Take old words from the old country. Thrush for bird. Yeah, it looks like a thrush. We'll call it a thrush, even though it may not
Right.
be, species-wise, an actual thrush. Okay? Coin new words. Back country.
Why not?
Okay? You can borrow French, Dutch, Spanish, which we borrow a lot of. Okay? I'm going to skip the periods and patterns of migration. Couple of look at American English versus British English, or modern received pronunciation. This is BBC, King's and Queen's English, so to speak. American English preserves older forms than British received pronunciation. Why?
Huh.
This doesn't come into being until the 19th century.
The received pronunciation.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. The standard doesn't begin until the 19th century. America's begun 300 years earlier. Right? So, British English comes to the United States, and then what happens to it?
Changes.
Okay, what else? we're cut off, aren't we?
Right.
We're cut off from the homeland. Yeah, there's some travel that goes back and forth, but not a lot. So it changes here, but it changes in its own direction. And it also fossilizes to some extent. For example, pronunciation differences. American short or flat ah. Grass, path. British,
Ross.
okay? They hate that. Brits hate that American pronunciation.
I hate the
What
ah.
else? American retention, strong post-vocalic R. We do tend to pronounce those R's like in park, car, girl, okay? Whereas in Britain, it's more pak, ka, gel, okay?
No, it does. I was trying to figure out. I don't know. I heard that like some areas in England would have used more of the post-vocalic R, and that there are groups from those areas that ended up coming into the United States.
Yeah, and that's, one of the things I don't have in all this is a lot of this depends on where they came from in England. What part, Southeast England is very much different than where some of my ancestors came from in southwest Scotland.
Yeah, because there are a lot of British dialects that use post-vocalic R.
Yeah. I mean, you can't talk about a single
Right.
British dialect, so to speak. American nasalized pronunciation. Americans tend to speak through their nasal passages more than you hear in Britain. We pronounce stressed, even unstressed syllables. Lavatory. Britain, lavatory. Canterbury, Canterbury. Worcestershire. Worcestershire.
Oh, is that?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Cirencester, Chichester.
Oh.
Okay. Differences in lexicon. We could go over those all night. Just look at the parts of a car. The hood versus the bonnet versus the boot and such. Right? Last thing. American dialectal areas. This is just one map. You can get a bunch of others that are much, much more detailed. So you have coastal southern here. Notice how far coastal southern goes into. It's almost Nashville.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's well into the Appalachians.
Southern Appalachian, Gulf Southern. Gulf Southern goes all the way up to Tennessee. Okay.
Yeah.
South Midland, Ozark, just around the Ozark Mountains.
Yeah.
North Midland, Upper Midwestern. Okay. New York City, Hudson Valley, Pennsylvania German, English, Boston. A couple of others, and what you'll see in various American dialectology is if you really simplify it, what often happens is you take a line from the Mississippi source to the mouth, and everything west of that is kind of general American.
Yeah.
Except for, Texas. But it's hard to tell the difference between somebody from Oregon and California or Nevada and California.
Yeah.
But closer you get up to Canada, then you start to notice it. Closer you get down in California to Mexico or to southern Arizona or southern New Mexico, okay? But Utah and Colorado and Idaho and Montana, they all sound alike, okay? Where you'll notice, stuff in California, where I'm from, for example, is you can pick up where people moved from. My folks moved from the Midwest. So my dad would always throw in an R in the word wash or Washington.
Yeah.
That's a Midwest dialectal characteristic. It's a kind of a Iowa and slightly upper Midwest.
Okay, that's where that's from.
Characteristic.
Yeah.
Questions? Comments? I know that was longer than you intended.
That was awesome.
I liked it.
Yes.
And this is my first time coming here, too.
Yes. Think to good night. So, okay, my question is, if I think of questions later,
Just email me.
Okay. Like, how
Yeah.
tolerant will you be? Like,
We're
about
pretty
me
tolerant,
billing
yeah.
you? Because I might be coming back to you for like years. Be like, hey,
Yeah,
so.
just email me and I'll, and you can copy these off this flash drive.
Okay, that would be great. Awesome. So what I'll do is I'll just take this PowerPoint and I'll find a way to share it. I think I can just share it on our My MT section, but if anything, I'm pretty sure I can save